Hello everyone! In this video we're going to continue our discussion of functions with a specific topic called menu-driven programs. Now menu-driven programs are precisely what they sound like. They're programs that are driven by the use of a menu. The user is presented with several options and they'll choose one and continue to choose one until they select quit. And so we've done several iterations of this already with our cookies program. So that's what we're going to revisit today. Here's the original. We printed the menu, and the user was able to select from a type of cookies, and they only got to buy once. So when we did loops, we updated this particular one with a while loop so that we printed the menu, we added the quit option, and as long as they didn't pick option 4 or the quit option, then they got to keep buying cookies. So that continued on until they selected quit. So now we want to take this same idea and break it into functions. So one of the cool things about functions is that we're able to abstract out things that would otherwise be duplicates. So for example, these 7 lines of code are the exact same as these. So there's really no reason to print them twice when instead we could build a menu function to do that for us. So instead of printing the menu in main, we would create a menu function. So here's what the prototype would look like. We'll call it menu. It doesn't take in any parameters because there's no necessary information. It's just going to print out the menu. We have it at the moment returning an integer. That way we can go ahead and scan in the user's response and return that to main. So we'll make room for main. And then we'll go ahead and build this function. We're going to have the user's choice, and then everything else is just printing out these options, scanning in the user's choice, and returning that choice to main. So this is our menu function. Create an integer called choice, print the menu, read in that choice, and then return that to main. So in main, we'll also need somewhere to store that. If this is going to return an integer, then we need somewhere to keep it. So we're going to create an answer in main. And we're also going to need a total to keep track of how many cookies they are purchasing. Now before we can consider our menu function done, we need to add preconditions and then we need to test it. Now since the parameter list is empty, we can say there are no preconditions. And our post conditions is that our menu will be printed and the user's choice will be returned. So now we're ready to test it out. So we're going to use our main, and our main's very minimal at the moment. That's okay. We'll develop it as we go. We'll call menu with its empty parameter list. And menu will return the user's choice, which we're storing in answer in main. So we're just going to test this function and make sure it's working. Make sure we got the answer correctly. Okay, so remember, since C is a compiled language, we're going to start here at the beginning of main. We've created 2 variables, answer and total, and then we called menu. So that transferred control from main to menu. Menu printed out this menu and is now waiting for our answer. So if we say 2, menu returns 2, and now answer is equal to 2. So we can assume that menu is working the way that we expect it to, and now we can continue to build our program around that. So as long as answer's not 4, we can process that. Processing in this case looks like figuring out which type of cookie the user is buying. So we're going to create a function that will process their choice and return the price of the cookie that they've selected. So we'll create a second function down here. So the user's choice is going to be passed in. 1, 2, and 3 represent type of cookies. 4 represents quit. Anything else is invalid. We're going to return the price of the cookie. And we'll return 0 if the choice is 4 or invalid. So remember our prices of cookies. 1 is Thin Mints. 2 is Samoas. 3 are shortbreads. And our other options both return 0. So if it's invalid or if the choice is 4, then we should return 0. Now in our original program, we also printed out the price of the cookie for the user to see. Let's add those in real quick. So these won't affect the overall flow of the program. They're just going to add some print statements before we return the price. If they select quit, then there's nothing to print here and the price is 0. But if they select an invalid option, we're also going to add the print statement for that, which is sorry, that was not a valid option. Remember that the return statement is the end of our function. So as soon as we hit the return, we're going to leave. For all of our valid options, these first three implicitly nested ifs have their returns in the if statement. So if we select any of those, we're going to return right away. If it turns out to be 4 or an invalid option, we'll still return at the end of the program, and we're going to return 0 for 4 or invalid. So before we integrate this into our program, we want to test it and make sure it's working. So we're going to go back to main. We're going to leave those parts. We're pretty sure that they work. And we're just going to test process real quick. We'll hard code something that we can check. So in this case, we're going to check process 2, which we know is Samoa's. Okay, so we're checking process 2 Samoa's. Samoa's are $3 per box. So we should have returned 3. So we'll make sure that that's working by printing out the total. Okay, so we're returning the correct values to main still. Okay. There's one more major task that we're going to have, which is to actually buy the cookies. Prompt the user for how many boxes they want and then add that to their total. So the current price is determined by the process of answer. And if that result isn't 0, then we want to buy cookies. So we're going to build a third function, the buy function, that takes in the price of the cookies and prompts the user for how many boxes they want and returns the total for that individual transaction. So we can add that to our accumulating total here in main, which starts at 0. So when we build our prototype, we need to make sure we're matching up the right parameters and the right return types. So this one takes in price, which is a float. So we need the float price, or we could call this something else if we wanted to. And we need to return a total for that transaction, which is also going to be a float. So the float will be our return type. Our preconditions are going to be just a slightly different here because we're ensuring that they're not 0. If the price is 0, then the user's not buying any cookies, and we don't really want to ask them how many boxes of nothing that they would like. So we're going to say that price cannot be 0. That is something that is taken care of somewhere else. We're not going to check for it in our particular function here. We're going to prompt the user for how many boxes they would like. And then we're going to return the current total. So we'll ask them how many boxes they would like and store that in boxes. They can only buy whole numbers of boxes, so they can't buy half a box of Thin Mints. So we'll use integers for that. And we want to calculate the total, which is the number of boxes, times the price that we are provided from main, and return that value. Sometimes you'll see a shorthand used instead. Instead of creating an extra variable, we could just return boxes times price, and it would equal the same thing. Since total is equal to boxes times price, instead of returning total, we could return boxes times price, and that would be fine. All right, let's test this particular function and make sure it works. We'll give it some known values so that we can check on it. So we're passing 3 as the price, so if we buy 5 boxes, we know we should get a transaction cost of 15, so that's working. Now we can check the accumulator. If we always use plus equal, we should accumulate into total. So 3 boxes would make 9, and 2 additional boxes would still make 15, so 5 boxes is $15. So our functions all work individually, which is good. Now we need to put them together, make sure they all work together as a cohesive whole to implement our cookies program. So in main, we get the user's answer from menu. As long as it's not quit, we're going to process it to get the price. As long as price is not 0, then we're buying cookies, so we'll buy. And at the end of the iteration, we'll prompt them with the menu again to get their answer for the next pass. Now whenever they give us 4, that's when we're going to quit. And normally we would print out our ending message. So we'll go ahead and do that. Let's create another function so that we can see a void function. This is our end message. We'll give it the total cost so that we can print out the full status report. What we're going to do is take in the total that the user spent, which could be 0, and print out our ending message, which has their total cost and a thank you message. So a lot of times when we have void for our return type, our only job is to print. So we'll print the total cost. We'll also print our thank you for shopping message. Thank you for buying some Girl Scout cookies. And then when we return, there's no value to follow the return statement. It's just return, then semicolon. So we have all of our functions in place. Now we're ready to try them all out together to make sure what we have is a cohesive program that prints the menu, asks what we would like, tells us how much those cookies are per box, how many would we like to get. If we quit, it should print out our final cost and that message. Let's try a couple more runs. Make sure that if we quit without buying anything, it goes to 0. Make sure it accumulates if we buy 2 different things. 9 and 350 is 1250. So it appears that our program is functioning correctly, and now what we have is a modular program that's menu driven and does the same job, but now main is very simple, very easy to follow. As long as answer is not 4, process the answer. If price isn't 0, add something to the total, prompt with the menu again, and you can see the whole contents of the while loop. It's not spread out over a bunch of lines. You can see all of it right here. And then if you need more information, say you're not sure about process, you can go down to the process function to see what's going on. In our next video, we'll talk more about developing programs that have functions in them, and we'll try to formalize some of the techniques that I showed you today, like testing our functions before we integrate them with the rest of main. I'll see you then.